Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we have special guest, the legendary Masked Superstar from professional wrestling. Welcome tonight. Thank you for being on the show.
It's my pleasure.
You have a long list of NWA championship titles. Just phenomenal that you're here tonight. I'm very honored to have you. We have Sean Bakewell here as well.
Hi.
Sean and I are very long-time fans of the Masked Superstar. And how did you get into wrestling?
Well, I actually backed into it by accident, I guess.
Okay.
I've told the story many, many times. I was in college at the time, and my grandmother and grandfather were big wrestling fans. I'm from the Pittsburgh area, and I'm familiar with this area up here. And it's been a real hotbed of wrestling for years and years and years. And I just actually went to a wrestling match, and the promoter at that time was Guido Mongo, who was running the Pittsburgh Arena, and we were coming through the garage area because we had gone down with our next door neighbor who was the boxing and wrestling commissioner. And a couple of wrestlers had asked us where the dressing room was. I said, I have no idea. They thought we were wrestlers, and we went into the dressing room with the commissioner and start looking around, and we were all starstruck too. And then Guido had come up and asked us in wrestling. I said, I don't know. I mean, I never did it before. 6 months later, I'm in professional wrestling.
Wow. And when you started, that was back in what, 73?
73, 74.
Did you start as the medic?
Right.
Okay, and you were with another guy?
Ron Matusi and I were both teaching at the time.
Okay.
I was teaching in Ohio, and Ron was teaching in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. And we just taught during the week, coached football, and during off season, wrestled on the weekends.
And you were masked wrestlers back then? Okay. Were you the heels or the faces back then?
We were whatever we could do to get a job.
Okay, okay.
It wasn't steady.
Yeah.
No.
And that was where now?
That was in the Johnstown area, Columbus, Ohio area,
Okay.
Detroit, Michigan. Guido was a promoter of the Pittsburgh area,
Okay.
but there were different promoters around who would get farm us out for weekends, and we just got as much experience as we could.
Okay. Then you went to Bolo Mongo?
Right.
Okay. That was in 74?
Well, Guido's original partner, who is now Nikolai Volkov, was Beppo.
Okay.
They were in a series of matches in Louisiana and New Orleans, and Beppo got thrown out of the ring and hit the railing and ruptured a spleen.
Wow.
So we had just finished school for the summer, and I got a phone call to hurry over to Pittsburgh, and he explained to me that they were going to go to Japan in about 6 weeks. So he said, hurry up and grow a Fu Manchu. We're going to cut your hair and put in a ponytail, and you're going to be in Japan in 6 weeks. So.
Wow. That's cool. That's cool.
So do you remember when you first became the Masked Superstar?
Oh yeah, I was wrestling in the Carolinas, Mid-Atlantic Territory, which was called at that time. And we had just finished up a series. Guido Mongo and myself were wrestling Wahoo McDaniel and the Anderson brothers and Paul Jones and everybody that they had. And Guido had gone home. His wife was ill, so he had gone home about 6 weeks prior to that. And in the interim period, George Scott, who was the matchmaker, and Crockett, who owned the company, approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in changing to another identity. So first I had to contact Guido, and Guido said, well, that'd be a good move for you, because he was tired of traveling. He'd been on the road for years and years and years. And they approached me with this masked character, who I am now. And I remember wrestling in a loser leave town match on a Sunday night in Greensboro, North Carolina, and Monday night drove to Greenville, South Carolina as a Masked Superstar.
That's great.
I don't remember who my opponent was, but I remember the night.
And you designed your mask and
My
everything?
wife's grandmother designed a mask.
It's
At that time, she was in her 60s, and she continued to make my mask until she died, and I think she died in 92. She made my masks, my capes, designed the outfits and everything.
You were saying earlier, at one time, you probably had around 1,000?
Right under 1,000.
Wow.
Different color combinations, the color of the mask itself, the color of the face, the stars, I would match those all, change them all up. And then the outfit was basically all black, but the stars on the knees and the side of the legs and my wrestling boots would all match the color of the mask.
So
And then I had different capes and different jackets.
And you started out as the villain, as the heel, as the Masked Superstar?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just started out wrestling.
Uh-huh.
I came out of the bad guy's dressing room.
Okay.
And after a number of years, fortunately some of the people liked how I performed, and, but I still never changed my tactics. I was always devious, always would break the rules.
That's what we remember.
To my advantage.
Yeah.
Or bend them, I would never break
Yeah.
them.
Wow. Well, what made you such a successful villain? What do you think?
Well, there was a number of things. I think changing the variety of the costume, the look, having a basic look, but the different color combinations was an intrigue to a lot of fans. I think often now when I go to Legends events or signings, a lot of people say, well, I love this mask, or I love that outfit, or I like that cape. So, and I would physically take note of what color combination I wore in each town and tried not to duplicate that for a period of time.
Okay.
I took pride in my interviews. I took pride in my work. I was always conscious of being physically fit and in good cardio condition, because there's an old saying, fatigue makes a coward of you. And I would always watch a lot of the other wrestlers. They were impressive the first 5 or 6 minutes of the match, and then they get tired, and then they weren't as impressive. So my objective was to not be ever out of condition. If anybody was going to be out of condition and tripping over their tongue in a match, it was going to be my opponent. And the fans recognized that.
Yeah.
They would see my opponent tired and beat up, but they would never see me tired and beat up.
Yeah.
I also think it was the way you presented yourself during the interviews that was always just so collected. You had it together. You weren't screaming and boastful and, I don't know how to put it, over the top.
Well, a
You
lot
just
of
almost
people,
seemed like you were
yeah.
methodically.
Came in, said what you were gonna do, and did it.
and that comes from listening to a lot of the old professionals. Boris Malenko was one of my mentors. He was my manager for a number of years, and he always said that people want to listen to what you have to say, but what you have to say has to be important. You can't brag about doing some outlandish thing and then not do it.
Right.
So I was always deliberate in and careful in what I would say, and made sure that if there's any possible way, 99% of the time, that's going to come true.
Wow.
The delivery was just perfect.
In this segment here, I want to talk a little bit about the masked wrestler. The concept of the masked wrestler, it was just something so intriguing and mysterious about that particular wrestler that would set him aside from the others. And I always thought that this originated in Mexico, but I found out that this actually originated in America. Back in 1915, there was a guy named, they went as the Masked Marvel. And from there, there was another guy, a Mexican promoter, saw somebody in Texas and took that concept to Mexico, and where it just exploded. So.
But that's an interesting fact. I didn't know that myself. But there is a lot of intrigue, and when you're a masked wrestler, it's part of your responsibility to protect that identity. And we were talking earlier about individuals that aren't as protective, but I had to become the masked superstar. Without the mask, I was nothing. So I had to protect this person, and I would drive literally hundreds of miles.
Mhm.
People would try to catch a look at, what does he look like? It's like the ketchup bottle, you know, we equated, you're waiting for the ketchup to come out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's out, then it's over. But
Yeah.
if they see your identity without the mask, then you've lost that mystique.
The magic's gone.
Yeah,
The chase is always more exciting than the fun.
exactly.
The catch. And well, that would separate your personal life from your professional life. I mean,
Well, that's part of the nice things about being a masked wrestler is your personal privacy. Many times I would go in a public area, Disney World or other amusement parks or in the mall, and they'd see Flair or they'd see Mulligan, or of course you see Andre, and they flock to him. Well, there I am just walking right by with my girls and my wife,
mhm.
or I'm swimming in a swimming pool, and they can't enjoy their day, and somebody might look over and say, "Are you one of those?" No. Oh,
Mhm.
then they're back to it. So I could be the mass superstar, and I could also be dad,
Mhm.
husband, my individual person too. So I enjoyed both aspects of it.
You could just turn it off like a switch when you wanted to.
Now, Mr. Wrestling #2 was this was our favorite time era in wrestling, is watching you
And
two.
don't tell me he was your favorite wrestler.
No,
Oh, no.
no, we
You
wouldn't
made
care.
You made it more exciting.
Yeah.
Because
Yes, you
The
definitely did. The
rivalry
rivalry
you two
between you two was just,
It was intense.
crazy. Yes, it
Yeah,
was.
when I first went into Georgia, I was in the Mid-Atlantic area,
Uh-huh.
and Ole Anderson was the matchmaker in Georgia at that time, and had asked me to come down for about a year and a half, but I was tied up with things in Georgia, in Charlotte, and then I had a little window of time, a 6-week break, and I took him up on it. Well, there must have been literally 15 or 20 masked wrestlers in Georgia. I thought I had gone in across the border to Mexico.
Uh-huh.
So my objective was one by one, eliminate all the masked good guys, bad guys, in between guys. I don't care guys, until it came down to Wrestling 2 and me.
Yeah.
And the focus of the 2 masked wrestlers. All the other guys were eliminated. And my objective was to get him out of the area. And it took about 2 years,
Mhm.
back and forth, a lot of stiff knee lifts to the jaw.
Yeah.
Couple KOs on his part and my part. And a lot of fans now remember those battles, you know. We went hours. We went 90 minutes. We went 120 minutes.
Wow.
In the hot Georgia sun,
Yeah,
outside,
In a
in
mask.
10 buildings, 110 degrees.
yeah.
But I have to say that I respect him, and I think he respects me, because I've heard a lot of interviews that he's done, and he compliments me, and I do the same for him, because he was a professional who protected his mask identity. He would go to 7-Elevens with it. He would go to restaurants with it.
Mhm.
He would check in hotels with the mask. He was even invited to an inaugural ball for President Carter.
Right.
And President Carter's mother would come to Columbus, Georgia, which wasn't too far from Plains. I wasn't one of her favorites.
Yeah,
Wrestling
yeah.
was
Understandably
favorite.
so, yeah.
So, and I was lucky that she didn't have more influence on the Secret Service, or I might have been arrested for a couple things.
Well, you guys were always after each other's masks, of
Always
course, and
after.
that was so intense. You know, watching that back in the '80s.
Yeah.
And you would do that. I mean, you took his mask off. You know, of course, he was hidden. He was hiding under the ring with his face. He in turn took yours off, and you covered yours with a referee shirt. But that was so
And
intense.
that was nationwide, you remember at that time?
Oh yeah, yeah.
That was before the nationwide network that they have now. That was TBS.
Mm-hmm.
And what was going on in Georgia was seen all over North America. So,
Seen it all, so they come
you know,
today.
we'd come up to this area, we'd come up to Columbus, Ohio, Michigan, we'd go out west.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just as intense there, because there were Wrestling 2 fans, Tommy Rich fans. There were sprinkles of Superstar fans, but I really didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed those days. It was real nice.
Wow. well, kids like us, at the time, we were your biggest fans, we thought, we used to go see you at Columbus, Ohio, and I think we were cheering the loudest at Gordon. That's how we remember it. And welcome back. We were talking here in between the breaks about your matches with Andre the Giant, and I believe you're the first wrestler to body slam Andre the Giant, which, if you know Andre the Giant, was, how much did you say he weighed?
Well, his weight would fluctuate. He was right under 7'2".
Mm-hmm.
When I first wrestled Andre, he was a donut over 500.
Uh-huh.
When I finished wrestling Andre, he was a couple donuts over 700.
That's incredible.
So it would
That's
go up and
incredible.
down depending upon the time of the year, the heat outside, and the number of cans of adult beverage that he
Yeah.
took that night. But it was always heavy, trust me.
Do you have any wrestler, I saw this, do you have any wrestler that you really enjoyed being in the ring with more so than maybe others? Do you have a
Well, I've been asked that question a number of times.
Mhm.
What was your favorite match? Who's your favorite opponent? And it's like a father that has multiple kids.
Mhm.
You like them all. There's a couple that you maybe favor a little better,
Mhm.
but to pick out a couple, Tommy Rich was a good opponent. Dino Bravo was a good opponent. Andre was a good opponent. Blackjack Mulligan, Wrestling 2. A couple in Japan, Inoki and Fujinami, Saguchi. I was fortunate in my career that I was in main events. So I got to wrestle all the top wrestlers there were all over the world. And I have good memories of many of them. There's a couple that I won't mention by name that I don't care if I ever see again.
Okay. Fair
And they
enough.
probably don't care if they see me either. They were brutal matches, but you can put up with that. But like I said, I was in a position, I guess a lucky position.
Mhm.
When I first started wrestling, I was with an old professional who was higher up in the ranks. And even when I first went to Japan, I was in main events. So I didn't know what it was to struggle with guys that were my same ability. I was probably killing people and didn't know it.
I don't think
I
there
thought
are
I
any
was
guys
great
in yours.
and wasn't very good.
But anyway, you were talking about brutal matches. What were maybe some of the worst injuries that you sustained in your career?
See this here? This is the extent. This is the extent of years and years of grappling and pulling and stomping and punching and kicking and breaking and gouging. Every finger, thumb broken many times. Wrists broken, biceps torn, pecs torn, knees blown out, calves pulled, shoulders separated. You pick which one is the most devastating. At the time, that's the most devastating. But it's part of the wrestling business. Anybody that's been in wrestling a year is going to feel multiple injuries. And I do a number of seminars around the country now for up-and-coming wrestlers, and I tell them, enjoy what you're doing now. You're going to have to work through a lot of pain, a lot of injuries, and it'll catch up to you. But you only have a brief window of opportunity to do this. There's millions of people in the world that would love to be in a position that I was in or that they're in. There's only a few slots. It's like professional football, baseball, hockey. A few guys get the opportunity to make it and make a career out of it. So the injuries come with it.
Well, speaking of being brutal, weren't you in the first? Were you in the first cage match?
I was in the first cage match that went a 60-minute time limit.
Oh, okay.
I did 15 cage matches with no outcome. That was never done before.
Wow.
So as a reward, we got to do 15 more with a 90-minute match.
Uh-huh.
Get them
So they were so good. So as a reward for that, we had a no time limit. Where we went an hour and 20 minutes with 2 special referees. So sometimes it's not good to be good.
Well, you just kept getting reward upon reward there.
Yeah. And it was, I'll tell you what, it was in the summertime, down south in the Carolinas,
Mhm.
when it was 100, 110 outside, and you're fighting Blackjack Mulligan in a cage, there's no place to go. And Mulligan at that time was about 375, 76 pounds. This is the beginning of the summer.
Wow.
I was right close to 300 pounds. At the end of the summer, I was under 250, and Mulligan was under 300.
Mhm. Wow.
We weren't eating much, but we had adult beverages after each
Yeah.
match.
Well deserved.
Yeah. Well, we were talking a little earlier about Japan. Now, you and Andre and Blackjack Mulligan were the machines.
Right.
Okay. A pretty obvious comedic gimmick, you know, that really worked. I mean, that was very popular. What, back in like
Well, it was
26, right?
It was supposed to be. There's a long story, but I'll condense it. There was two guys, two very popular wrestlers in Japan from New Japan called the Machines.
Mhm.
Andre and I had just left the tour, came home for 3 or 4 weeks, were supposed to go back. In that 3-week, 4-week window, the Machines had jumped from New Japan to Old Japan, left the company, but their manager stayed. So they asked us, everybody knew who we were, Mass Superstar, how can you hide the giant? They said, we're gonna have the manager challenge the other team and humiliate him. Every night we would challenge him.
Mhm.
Television, we would challenge him. Radio, we would challenge him. The giant machine, super machine are better than my strong machines.
Mhm.
And then Andre, if you remember, he was scheduled to do the Princess Bride.
Right.
So they were supposed to know who we were.
Mhm.
And Andre had convinced WWF to bring it over here, and it was only going to be a short 6-week window, 8-week window. But it grew, it caught on, because everybody, oh, I know who that is, oh, I know who that is. And then Andre was scheduled to go to England to make the movie, so they brought in Mulligan as the big machine. And then we had 6-man tags with Junkyard Dog Machine, the Piper Machine, George the Animal Steel Machine, and it caught on.
It was a great.
And even today, people say, well, we knew who you were. I'm thinking, I think you were supposed to know who I was.
Yeah, it was overly obvious, you know,
Yeah.
obviously who you were. But I didn't realize this till I watched the YouTube clips, your interview with Gene with just you and Andre. And it was very
From the island of
entertaining.
Fuyu, too.
Yes, and Andre's sitting there, you know, of course, Gene's acting like he doesn't recognize, but there's something familiar about you guys. You know?
Right.
Very, very
I could,
entertaining.
at that particular time, we had been back and forth to Japan 10, 14 weeks a year.
Mhm.
And I was speaking a little more Japanese, and I've forgotten it now. But I would interject, I would be the spokesman for the two.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Andre would know Toyota and Honda and
Uh-huh.
Yakamatsu and all this stuff. And his home country, his home island was Fuyu too.
Mhm.
And then when Mulligan became, he was Honda, he knew Honda and Yokohama
Mhm.
and sushi. But I mean, we had a good time with it.
Mhm.
And the fans, we'd do a lot of interviews over there, walking down the street. Of course, even the Japanese fans knew who we were. But it even caught on there because they would get on and they'd be saying something and we'd ask the interpreter, so what are they saying? So they're challenging the strong machines too.
Oh. I would like to ask you, what do you think are the biggest differences between wrestling back then and now?
Well, I think the perception by the fans is a big factor. You know, I don't watch that much wrestling now, not because I don't like it.
Mhm.
You've got some good athletes in there. But the presentation, when I was real active, and up till probably the last 10 or 15 years, was basically family oriented.
Right.
You know, you could take your family to a show, your children, grandchildren, whatever, wife, and be entertained for a couple hours. The promoters and the matchmakers realized that there was value in having the family come out for the evening. Souvenirs, concessions, whatever. items for sale. And the biggest thing that I've seen now is, and I like to call it, I've mentioned this a number of times, the Howard Stern shock effect wrestling. They're gonna do something that's, oh, I didn't think they could do that, or why would they do that? To shock you, and if your kids are there, you gotta cover their eyes. You gotta, well, mommy or daddy, well, why did they do that to that girl? Or it goes back when my girls were growing up watching wrestling. They stopped watching wrestling when they were in high school, just before college, because they would portray all the females involved with wrestling as bimbos. And I've got 2 college-educated daughters, and they'd say, Daddy, you're in wrestling. Why do they always say the dumb blonde, or the dumb redhead, or this, that, or ridicule them? And it offended the fans. And what they do now, I don't let, and I made my business and made my career out of wrestling, but my grandchildren don't watch it because I don't know what to expect to see on television. It's
Right.
on cable now, it's uncensored, something plops out, or something does this, or something insinuated, then I have to explain to my grandsons why they did that. I think that's one of the biggest things that, and it's taken it away from the family, where the family is looking for another entertainment. Maybe they're going to the movies together, but they're not going to wrestling together. The boy or the college student, or they're going by themselves, or they get a bunch of guys to go, but the family's not there anymore.
Well, and there are fewer and fewer things that the families can do together nowadays anyways.
Right.
And it makes for awkward watching when you're sitting there with your family, I would imagine. But yeah, back when we were kids, we were watching it. We never worried about that.
No, and your parents probably never
And it
worried
was,
about
it
it
was
either.
family night.
And your parents would
O'clock
come-
Saturday,
And
everybody was
your parents
doing
would
it.
take you to the matches because it was an evening out together. It was something that you could do.
The worst thing that we'd see is, guys like you, just yelling, that's beating up the good guys, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
and that,
That was all good
that was the
fun.
way it was. The focus was on wrestling, the focus was on tough matches. It wasn't on, innuendos or vulgar gestures or cussing somebody out. That's cheap. Anybody can get a reaction from
Right.
that. You can turn around and cuss somebody out or give them a gesture, and of course they're gonna get mad at you. But that's not controlling the fans. That's what they call cheap heat. I think it offends some of the new wrestlers now because you've got some good athletes, but they're not given the opportunity to learn their craft. They're given a script and they're told what to do and what to say, and it doesn't really match their character. You have to become that individual. And I would never feel comfortable, doing something that I couldn't do, and I've been asked to do. Will you do this? No, that's not me. I don't feel comfortable doing it. But now the job setup is there's only 1 or 2 companies. I like to call it 1.5 companies. There's one big company and another company about halfway there. And people are afraid of their positions. They're afraid of their job. And if I tell you to do something, me being the promoter or the matchmaker, and you don't do it, get somebody else to do it. So consequently, you have things that they're doing, they might not feel comfortable doing it, but they want to hold on to their job.
Well, before, you had somewhere else to go.
There was 22
Now,
companies.
You have nowhere to
There
go.
was 20, if you didn't feel comfortable doing something, you didn't do it. Not that we all had scruples, but we all had boundaries. There are certain things that I was gonna do, there are certain things that I'm never gonna do. And that's my standard. And not only me, that was a standard for most guys at that time. Now it's a little shady because there's a lot more money involved now. There's a lot fewer positions. There's fewer rungs on the ladder. So, but from my own perspective, that's how I see it. Although I made my career wrestling, I love wrestling, it's a good business. There's some people in it that aren't good. There's some things that I'm not proud of, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, when was your last match?
I don't suffer from Alzheimer's, but I do have part-timers. It's been a couple years. I do more of this type setting. I do signings, appearances for charitable events and things like that. It's been a couple years.
Okay.
I've had a couple of requests, but I sort of lean, rather than get in the ring,
Mhm.
I lean towards doing the autograph signings. And,
Okay.
it's been a couple years, I think.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being on the show tonight. It has been an absolute honor.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's,
You can imagine how huge of a person you were in our childhood. Pretty excited about this.
Oh, we're sitting here very starstruck. You have no idea. So
well, I
thank you.
appreciate you asking me up, and I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you.
How many times do I have to tell you, just because something isn't good doesn't mean it's bad?